ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Four Guys, a Girl, and a Show. I am JQ. With me, like always, is our distinguished panel, Mr. Brian Isaacs.
Hey, hey.
Miss Stacy Rader.
Good evening.
Mr. Dave Harriman.
How's it going?
Mr. Mike Hopkins.
Hey.
And our special guest today, we have a treat for you all. We have producer, writer, talented man we have with us today. Shows like Flash Forward, Eli Stone, Brothers and Sisters. He's even done a little show that we're currently watching called Arrow, CSI Miami. He's been on video games, the X-Men Origins video game, Call of Duty 3. I mean, you name it, he's dove into most of anything we have in our pop culture. Mr. Marc Guggenheim.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, you know, we'll get to the elephant in the room eventually, but let's dive into where it all started. I mean, were you a writer by trade? Do you want to always produce? Do you eventually want to direct? Jump us into the beginning with you.
Oh, great question. Well, I actually started out as an attorney. I really wanted to practice law from a very young age, and that's sort of what I ended up doing. But sort of in my third year of law school, my brother Eric, who at the time was in his senior year of film school, asked me if I would write a movie with him, and basically just write a script for fun. He wanted to be a director, and he thought, well, in order to be a director, he should have some experience writing. That would give him a good perspective on the whole, craft, if you will. And because it was a little bit of a lark, he, didn't want to do it alone, and he invited me to do it. And I had very little experience with creative writing. I did a little bit in high school, but that was pretty much it. And yet, when I did it with him, I think we both got bit by the bug because we both ended up as screenwriters. He was a little bit more direct about it because he was already coming from film school. I ended up spending 5 years practicing law, but I would take all my vacation time and spend it out in Los Angeles, and I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to write. And long story short, I was 29 years old. I was going into my 5th year of practice, which is sort of when you have to start deciding if you're going to fish or cut bait on the whole effort to become a partner of the firm, when I was at a large Boston law firm at the time. And I was sort of like, becoming a little disenchanted with the law, and I was realizing that if I was going to make a move out west, it was sort of now or never. This was the time. So I quit my job, and I knew at that point enough about the industry that I knew I wanted to go into television, and I knew about television staffing season, which is this period which has become since, I think, a little bit less formal with the advent of more cable and more mid-season launches and whatnot. But at the time, this was over 10 years ago, it was around March and April. So I moved out in March of 2000, wrote a sample West Wing spec. West Wing was in its first season at the time, and this was back when you would, if you wanted to break into a TV show, you would do a spec episode of whatever was in vogue at the time. I decided to do a West Wing. That got me a job on the practice, and that was my first gig, and I've sort of been very fortunate to have been working since then.
Awesome. And so you started off writing, and when did you get into producing?
Well, I guess the answer sort of depends upon how one defines producing. You start out, the way television works is you start out as sort of a staff writer. That's like the bottom entry-level position. And then you spend, like 4 years in the business, and you start to get producer sort of just added to your title. And whether or not you're doing any actual producing at that point really depends upon the kind of show you're working on and how the show runs. Some shows and showrunners involve the writers in the production process more than others. I guess you could say I really started producing with my first show called Eli Stone. And I co-created that with Greg Berlanti, who I met when I worked on a show called Jack and Bobby. And that's sort of when I became a showrunner, which is the term for an executive producer who literally runs the show or helps run the show, and that's when you sort of start really getting into the nuts and bolts of producing. It becomes more than just covering set or more than just going to casting. You're responsible from everything from soup to nuts. But in Hollywood in particular, the term producer, it can be a very, very wide-ranging kind of job title, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds of producers. And just to give you an example of sort of how fungible the meaning of the title is, in television, the highest sort of rank you can achieve as a producer is being an executive producer. But in film, actually, that's the lowest rank. Usually if you see the title executive producer, that's someone who is, only had tangential involvement in the production of the film. So, just to be, sort of succinct about it, in television, executive producer are the highest. In film, executive producer are the lowest. It's just one of those weird, Hollywood things. But, as I've, in the last couple of years, I've been sort of pulled into doing more producing purely as producing. In other words, like, I'll work on a movie and not be attached as the writer of the movie, but rather, sort of supervising another writer or doing what most producers do, which is, give notes, try to move the project forward, things of that nature. It's interesting for me because I never really set out to be just a producer. I've always sort of endeavored to be a writer-producer where I'm writing, basically producing the things that I write or co-write. And you'd ask if I want to direct, and the answer to that question really it changes with the day. There's some days where I think, oh, that would be a lot of fun, and other days where I just have no ambition to do that whatsoever. And I always sort of think, well, I'm still, I guess, relatively young, and one of these days I may want to direct. But at the moment, I'm very comfortable just doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome. And I see you have a wide range of what you've written and quote produced. What was the difference between video games? Because we have a lot of video game players on our podcast as well. Video games and movie and TV. What's the difference? What's the range? And is there any difference, basically? I mean, because I know a lot goes into a video game based on watching behind the scenes of like Arkham Asylum and stuff like that.
Yeah, I will say there's a huge difference. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be some kind of connective tissue or overlap between the three different mediums, but I'm a very big believer that if you write for one medium, you should have respect for the things that medium does well and the things that medium does poorly. And you should always sort of write to the medium's strengths, and you've got to have a healthy respect for the fact that you're not just, writing a script that can be slapdashed into any sort of format. You've got to appreciate, like, okay, if I'm writing a television episode, for example, I know that there's going to be some budgetary limitations. I've got to write to a 6-act structure. I've got to write to a commercial break. It's going to be more dialogue driven. If I'm writing a movie, that's a more visual medium. I'm writing in a 3-act structure. There are no commercial breaks. Video games is probably the medium that is sort of the least standardized because there's so many different kinds of video games. If you're writing a first-person shooter, that's, I think, requires a different kind of narration than a first-person shooter. Or a third, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's a third-person shooter first or first-person shooter first, but regardless, those are two very different, kinds of games from a storytelling perspective. In large part because when you're writing a first-person shooter, the convention is that that character doesn't speak. If you play a first-person shooter game, I would say 9 times out of 10, there's no narration from the character that you're inhabiting, and that's because philosophically, you're writing a first-person shooter game so that the player can sort of immerse themselves in that character, and that immersion would be hampered by a voice sort of coming in and sort of speaking for you, if you will. But if you're doing a third-person shooter game like, say Lara Croft, obviously that's a completely separate character from the player, and that character can speak and interact. So it's a very different kind of storytelling when you can actually give voice to your protagonist and give an identity and create a character for your protagonist than those situations when you can't. It's all those little technical things that sort of go into writing a video game. Like I said, it's not just about the medium of video games, it's the kind of game you're writing for. And also the fact that of the three mediums, I think video games is obviously the youngest, particularly the kind of video games where you can tell a real story. That's something that has only become possible, with the technology in the past, decade or so. And it's only getting more and more sophisticated. I think, one of the reasons I got into video games, apart from liking video games, was the fact that I wanted to sort of get in on the ground floor of a burgeoning, developing medium. When you come into television and film, yes, there's advances and, different things. But at the end of the day, when you're, writing a movie, you're writing in a medium that has been, movies have been around for decades, and they sort of are, set in their ways in terms of what the medium can accomplish. In, video games, it's really anything goes. In fact, if I have any sort of concern about video games and video game development, it's that I don't know if the developers are doing enough to sort of push the bounds of what's possible in video games from a storytelling perspective. Definitely always pushing the bounds in terms of what's possible from a technological perspective. But I think, in the next 5 years or so, we're going to see some really amazing stories and storytelling coming out of video games. If there's enough desire on the part of the marketplace.
Cool.
And Mark, if you don't mind me switching gears a little, I'd like to talk about, because you've also written for comic books as well.
Yeah, I have to say that's the achievement of a lifelong dream. I've always loved comics. Were sort of my gateway drug into popular culture, if you will.
Right.
That was sort of how I first got into, the genre and even television for the most part. Like one of my earliest memories is sitting on the floor of my room before I could even read, flipping through a Superman comic and just looking at the pictures. I was always fascinated by by comic books in that world, and that was, like I said, the gateway to a lot of other, kinds of storytelling.
Cool. And I know you wrote the last arc of the Justice Society before the New 52.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there were some things that were like unanswered that you really never got a chance to do?
Oh yeah, I mean when I got the word that 52 was going to happen, I had basically planned out 2 years worth of story, and I had laid the pipe for 2 years worth of issues. And when I got the word, I was writing issue 50, and as you know, the book switched over to 52 with issue 54. So I had 4 issues, and by the way, it wasn't even 4 full issues; it was 4 20-page issues. So
wow.
I was trying to figure out how do I, in basically 60 pages. Wait, I'm not doing my math correctly. In 80 pages, how do I wrap up 2 years worth of story? And there were definitely a lot of pieces and threads that I couldn't sort of put back in the box. My goal was my goal was sort of twofold. One was to provide as satisfying a conclusion as I could, and the second was to take some of the bigger toys that I had taken out of the toy box and return them to the toy box. But it was, I have to say, that was quite the challenge. That was not easy. I will say that I was probably the most proud of the JSA run for, wrapping it up as sort of succinctly and quickly as I was forced to. I was like, oh, that's, I don't know if that comes across in the writing, but I was a little bit like proud of myself for pulling off the, landing the triple axel.
No, the story doesn't feel rushed at all, but I do feel like there's so many unanswered questions. I mean, obviously, you introduced probably about I think 4 new characters.
Oh yeah, that was probably the biggest thing. Was I had introduced all these characters, and I very specifically introduced 4 new characters because I wanted to play. I wanted to not just play with the toys in the toy box, as I put it, but also put in some new toys to the toy box. And I just didn't have the chance to develop those characters the way I wanted to. I thought they were interesting. I thought they could have been they could have been a cool addition and would have been a lot of fun.
No, they definitely would have. I mean, yeah, especially you created 2 legacy characters. You had the I can't remember her name, but the Red Beetle, I think.
Yes.
And obviously, obvious tie there. And then you had the Dark Knight character. So I was kind of curious.
Both of those characters, I had plans for, and really, I felt it was important if you're doing, JSA, which is sort of the ultimate legacy book. Right. You should play around with some legacy characters, new legacy characters, and there's so much room for it, especially in the DC universe, where basically the entire sort of Earth 1 Silver Age, group of superheroes are legacy characters.
Right.
That was sort of the point of this little story I did with George Perez in the in the 50th issue of JSA. Was I wanted to show how even characters like Superman and Batman, which are not obviously legacy characters, essentially are.
Right.
And it sort of took all the Silver Age DC characters and linked them up to the Golden Age DC characters, because I do think the entire Earth 1 is, stems from very organically the group of heroes in, the former Earth 2 or the current Earth 2. It's hard to say what's former and current. But I definitely, wanted to continue that trend with the new characters. Who knows? Maybe one of these days I'll get a chance to play around with them.
Now, will we be seeing any more creator-owned stuff from you? I mean, because I personally loved your Super Zombies from Dynamite. I really enjoyed that. It was totally different. and I'm not the hugest zombie fan either, so I really did enjoy it.
Oh, thank you very, very much. Well, I've been talking to a whole bunch of people about creator-owned stuff. Image. There's so many exciting things going on with Image. Right now, in the creator-owned space, I'm writing this original graphic novel for Oni with Justin Greenwood, who is my artist for Resurrection, my other creator-owned property. So he's drawing away and I'm writing away, and then once that project is completed, I'll be able to start looking to some other creator-owned things. But I definitely. It's funny. For me, the allure of comics is started with working and writing with, like I say, the toys in the toy box. You want to play with Superman, you want to play with Spider-Man, but then you really get sucked in. At least I got sucked in as a writer to the medium itself and exploring sort of how you can tell stories in this medium. And that's one of the reasons why I find creator-owned work so satisfying, especially nowadays. It's a very exciting time, I think, in the creator-owned world, as you have more and more A-list writers moving to create their own characters. And right. I think there's a real groundswell that you see, in the past year of writers and artists who, in the past, hadn't done much creator-owned work, really making a push into that space.
Do you think that's because it's just creative freedom, or do you think it has to do with anything with the top 2 publishers?
I think it's a combination of a variety of factors. I think it's certainly I think it's part of it's the economic temptation of you've seen people like Robert Kirkman have an incredible amount of financial success
right.
in the creative space, and that it invites people to try their hands, sort of like Gold Rush. Like, Roberts come back and said there's gold in Mendar Hills, and that opened up, I think a lot of people rushing west. So that's part of it. I think part of it's, the desire to do some things sort of free of the, shackles of doing work for hire work. And they're golden shackles. They're great shackles, but at the end of the day, you're writing and creating, based upon a certain set of rules, and it's nice occasionally to get into a space where you make the rules. And then I think there's also just the, I think the collective notion that if comic books are going to continue to survive, we've got to replenish the creative pool a little bit. Spider-Man and Superman are great characters. Wolverine and Batman are great characters. But where are the next set of great characters? Where are the next set of great ideas? Comic books, I think, survive because while there's a certain part of the land that has always, grown a certain kind of crop, we've always created other crops, in other portions of the land. And, I'm thinking like, books like The Authority and Planetary, two Warren Ellis books, or Why the Last Man, which, or Watchmen, which remind us what the medium is capable of. And I think it's very important that we have those new kinds of ideas and new kinds of books coexisting alongside the books that have been, being published in one form or another for decades and decades.
Cool. Very cool.
Sure. And speaking about the characters that you're talking about, who's the next up, and you've written the Green Lantern Emerald Knight story, that one DVD. That was a great DVD. You wrote the screenplay for Green Lantern, another iconic character. Rumor has it you're in the middle of possibly writing another character that we're going to see. I don't know if that's announced yet. Maybe you can shed some light on that. But you're currently working on a new spin on the Emerald Archer, Mr. Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow. And don't know how much you can talk about it because the show is still on. But, I mean, that's something that, from what I've seen the first 2 episodes, I've been impressed because I never really thought of Oliver Queen as a predominant character, but now seeing this particular take on it, I'm actually very impressed, and I went and started picking up Green Lantern books. I part-time at a comic book shop, so at the comic book shop I actually read them on the side, and I'm actually impressed. And you turned me on to that, so I want to say thank you for that. Give me something else to read. But
I want to thank you for the compliment. That's the highest compliment you could pay us.
You're welcome.
I think I've always been a fan of Green Arrow, and I feel like that's a character that, it's funny, Green Arrow kind of reminds me of Marvel's Moon Knight in the sense that, he's a character that has these, sort of genetic similarities to Batman, but has never gotten the respect or the fan love that Batman has had. And I'm sort of, fascinated by, well, why does a character like Batman, always sell at the top of the charts, but a character like Green Arrow or Moon Knight, which is just, just one chromosome, just one DNA strand away from Batman, not, always sit at the top of the charts. And I think it's, it's for me, it's fun to sort of explore why that is. Intellectually, obviously. I think, with Arrow, we're trying to do, quite frankly, a couple of things. We're not, we're trying to, first of all, do a television show based upon a comic book character, and that itself has a lot of different challenges to it from a creative perspective and a production perspective. But at the same time, we're also trying to take a quote-unquote lesser-known character and introduce him to a mainstream audience. And that is also its own, kind of trick. But I'm glad that it's sort of having a trickle-down effect for the comic books because we obviously, at the show love Green Arrow. That's why we're working on it, and it's great to see that, we're regenerating some interest in the comic book community. And I probably would be very remiss if I didn't say, check out the digital comic that we're doing contemporaneously with the show. So we're not just doing Arrow, the TV show, we're also doing Arrow, the comic book. And that's a lot of fun, too.
Personally, I love the fact that the so-called sketch artist you have for every episode is Mike Grell. You can't get much more Green Arrow than that. I mean, that's too perfect.
Thank you. I have to say, I was thrilled that we got Mike, and I give all the credit to Jeff Johns. We had this idea that we wanted Mike Grell to be the sketch artist. This is me just recycling an old idea of mine. When I worked on a show called No Ordinary Family, which was about a family with superpowers, Michael Chiklis' character was a police sketch artist. And I helped produce the pilot, and I thought it would be really awesome if he drew like Alex Ross. So we got Alex Ross to do all the sketches that Michael Chiklis' character did.
Oh, wow.
So when we were writing the Arrow pilot, and there was just this organic moment where Oliver Queen would be presented with a police sketch of the vigilante who quote-unquote saved his life, it was time to sort of trot out that idea, but give it a Green Arrow specific spin by having Mike Grell do the sketch. And Jeff Johns hooked us up, and Mike's been great. Mike's actually been the artist because he's obviously, he's such a seminal Green Arrow artist, and his particular grounded take was so important and so influential on us when we were developing the show,
right.
That it was important to have him represented in the show. We also dropped his name. There's a judge that is sort of Laurel's nemesis named Judge Grell, and he's also one of our rotating artists for the Green Arrow digital comic. So he's well represented in the show, as he should be. His take on Green Arrow was a huge influence on our take.
Right. I mean, it definitely. I mean, you can definitely see the Longbow Hunters right in the show. So yeah, I definitely see it.
Yeah, we even spent quite a bit of time talking about whether or not to set the show in Seattle, which is where Longbow Hunters and Grell's subsequent run on the Green Arrow, the monthly
right.
comic, was set. So yeah, there's a huge Longbow influence.
Now I got to ask. I know you probably can't give out a lot, but I love all the the so-called DC characters that you're bringing in, but are there any chances, I got to ask you this, that we might see 4 that are probably really connected to Ollie? Shadow, Roy, Connor, or Eddie?
Wait, what was the last one?
Eddie Fry?
Eddie. Oh, okay. Well, I can answer that. Let's see. Let's take them in order. Shadow. I would watch the episodes really closely, and by really closely, I mean frame by frame. And
got it.
The answers in the frame by frame. Connor, we have a very specific plan for how to do our version of Connor.
Awesome.
And I can't say when that's going to happen. We keep talking about that episode and keep pushing it down the road. But we have Andrew Kreisberg, my co-creator, co-showrunner, came up with an awesome idea. What was the third character?
Roy.
Oh, Roy. Same. We have our take. It's really cool. I don't know if we would get to it in the first season or not, but anything's possible. One thing that we've discovered in doing the show, we sort of started out with a sort of very specific plan, but we find ourselves doing things a lot sooner than we had originally discussed, which I think is actually good. One of the things that we're proud of with the show is that we burn through story. We do things. There's not a lot of. You don't have to delay gratification if you're watching the show. You'll get a lot of satisfaction very early on. And I guess that's a good segue into the fourth character you mentioned, which is Eddie Fires. And you'll see him in episode 5.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I really actually love. I love Eddie. I love the character and the way we've written him. He's just really standout, and I think the way he comes into the show, you'll find surprising.
Oh, cool. And I do like the nod to Speedy with it being his sister's nickname. That was really cool too.
Right. Yeah, that part of the fun for us is how do we work in these little Easter eggs? And we always want to we want to work in some ones that are really obvious and other ones that are more subtle, and sometimes sort of combine the two where like Speedy is an obvious Easter egg, but I think what makes it unexpected is that it's connected to his sister, and yet at the same time his sister clearly has a drug habit, which is a very intentional tip of the hat to the famous junkie storyline. So there's our goal with the show, not our goal, but our methodology with the show is, I guess, very similar to the Nolan Dark Knight movies, which are also obviously a huge influence, to sometimes be very direct in terms of our one-to-one translation from the source material to in our case the TV show, and in other cases be a bit more subtle about it.
Cool.
Well, that was my question. Is you had mentioned a digital comic coming out of Arrow.
Yeah.
And I know for the TV show, they're keeping no extra characters like Batman coming in or anything. With a digital comic, are you going to be introducing other DC characters that are there that you wouldn't do on the show?
I would say yes to the first question and probably not to the second question. For sure we'll probably get into some DC comic characters in the digital comic. I would say that, like, for example, you mentioned Batman. Like, if we were to do Batman in connection to Arrow, we would absolutely do it on the show. Because, if you're going to do Batman, sort of do it on the parent show. Because here's the thing about the Arrow digital comic. It's, we consider it canon. So there's nothing in the digital comic that we wouldn't do on the show. And the stuff that happens in the digital comic, either, stems directly from something that happened on the show or ties in directly to something that will happen on the show. So, to sort of be crass about it, I don't think we would shoot our Batman wad, as it were, on the digital comic. We would do it, full-fledged on the show. But honestly, like, that's, everyone always asks about Batman, and certainly, Batman is one of the more grounded DC Comics characters, so he fits in with our grounded take of Arrow. But, obviously Batman's a big deal still for the feature film side of things. So, those decisions are going to get made far above my pay grade. That said, we've really been very lucky, and DC has been very generous in giving us access to a whole lot of characters, in their catalog, and you'll hear references and you'll see, various different characters crop up, in new and interesting ways. They're not always going to be the obvious, like I said, one-to-one translation. Part of the fun is going, oh, wait a second, I see the comic book origins of that character.
Yeah, I agree. It's just the way y'all have done it so far has been very good, and all the nods to the Easter eggs I've caught. I would say 90% of them. Now you said that one little thing about Shadow, and I'm going to look for it again now. But even with Laura Lance, just it's just so subtle, and everyone who knows the history is probably waiting for the transition. And I don't know if that's going to happen in this realm, but it'd be kind of cool to see.
Well, I think, it's funny, I'm not necessarily trying to stump for this week's episode. In fact, I don't know when your podcast sort of goes online, but this week's episode, the third episode, you'll definitely want to watch if you have any interest in Laurel's trajectory, because it's sort of our first, I think, very obvious nod to where her character can go.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Oh. Now, your work with you did work on Emerald Knights with Green Lantern.
Mm-hmm.
And DC's got some more animated movies coming out next year. They got a whole slew slated to come out. Are you doing any future work on any animated stuff for DC?
You know, it's funny. Mike Carlin, who was actually the editor who brought me into DC, he's the one who hired me to do Batman Confidential and Justice Society. He's now basically the DC guy that helps produce the animated movies. And we talked about it, and we specifically talked about doing something Arrow-related. But honestly, it's a little premature. The truth be told, between the digital comic and the TV show, my plate is so crazy full. You know, when things sort of calm down or we get into a hiatus, I can start, you know, sort of looking to, you know, going to guys like Mike and saying, hey, I got some time. I'd love to do an animated, you know, movie or whatnot, which I really would. I you know, had a blast doing the Green Lantern Emerald Knights, you know, tie into the Green Lantern movie, and I would love to play again in that space. I just have to be so careful. A lot of times I'll get really too ambitious and take on too much work. And I've got to be very careful about that tendency in myself. Otherwise, I will spread myself way too thin.
And there's also rumors of you possibly adding your take on the Flash. Is that proper to say, or is that still in its infantile stage?
You know, I guess it's infantile. It's really, you know, there's. I'm not talking as school. Greg Berlanti, Michael Green, and I wrote a Flash screenplay. The Warner Brothers commissioned from us, and now it's sort of in Warner Brothers' hands. You know, my understanding from just from stuff I've read in the trades is that they want to launch the Justice League movie and then spin people out. You know, spin characters out from that take. You know. It's funny. I was just yesterday talking to Greg about the Flash, and I still am quite fond of our take. And you know, it's an interesting mix between sort of the super grounded take of Arrow and the obviously, you know, more super heroic take that we had for Green Lantern. It sort of sits somewhere in the middle there. I'm really proud of it. I think it's a fun script. So, you know, once Justice League comes out and the gates come open, you never know. You know, the nice thing about screenplays is they don't age. They you know, they're there, you know, for anyone to sort of produce and direct, and we sort of have to see how the wheels turn. But it was fun to work on.
Cool. And you also you were the screenplay writer for the Green Lantern movie with Ryan Reynolds a few summers ago.
Yeah.
And how'd you feel about that? I mean, did you? I'm excited to see if there's going to be a second one. Is there any rumors about that yet, or no?
You know, we did a treatment for the second one, and again, I think that's sort of, you know, I'm not privy to the game plan, you know, for the DC characters in feature films. Like I said, that happens above my pay grade. You know, and obviously when you have these characters, you're going to have some sort of big plan, and you're going to figure out the best way, if you're Warner Brothers, to you know, introduce these characters further into the feature world. But you know, my involvement in the
I think we're losing him.
We're having some technical difficulties here. See if it picks it up right now. But so far, some really good stuff, guys. What do y'all think so far?
Really enjoying listening to him. It seems down to earth. Interesting background, starting off in lawn, writing all this stuff.
Yeah, I was amazed to hear that too. And that's why I love when you talk to artists at cons. You never know what you're going to hear, and he was a lawman. I mean, who would have thought that? and we also got some good stuff in about future projects, and sounds good. I mean, that was a really good interview, and hopefully we can get him back on and thank him.
Hey, guys.
Oh, there's Mark. He's back.
Welcome back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Hello?
You hear us?
Oh, I can hear you guys just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
there.
perfectly.
We got you. We got you.
Oh, okay. That's so weird. I literally haven't moved, haven't touched anything. The wild and wonderful internet. The brand new frontier. I think maybe that was one of those.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to ask you one last question. Yeah, now you worked on the show Jack and Bobby,
Let
right?
me down.
Now, that was created by Brad Meltzer, if I'm not mistaken. Could you ever see yourself like you two collaborating on anything at all?
Oh yeah, I worked. I was a writer on the show, just a member of the writing staff for basically the first season, the first and only season that we had. That was honestly, that was a terrific experience. All of us still keep in touch with each other. And I actually just wrote a movie for Logan Lerman, who plays Bobby from Jack and Bobby. So it was fun to see him on set and be like, wow, it's like stepping back in time for both of us. And he's grown into like just Green Lantern and the Flash with me.
Well, Mark, we seem to be having a technical difficulty right now. But what we're going to do, we're going to thank you. If you can hear us, can you hear us now, Mark?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you guys just fine.
All right, you seem to be cutting out on us, though. But I mean, Mark, we appreciate having you on, man. It was really good talking to you, and you impressed me by your openness and even your portfolio and what you have. I mean, we're looking forward to seeing more things from you. And if you want to stick around, we're going to talk about some more TV shows here and there, and maybe some comics.
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool.
Yep.
Well, all right. Well, we have another show that we like to watch here. A little show on Sunday nights called The Walking Dead. And for those of you who are fans and watch it, I mean, we've seen some pretty cool things come from that show. And you know what? I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dave Harriman and let him lead the discussion.
Oh, thank you very much, Jason. For those of you who don't know, if you guys want to check out Pendragon's post early, I write some little teasers on The Walking Dead before I give you that little preview of some things that are coming in for the next episode when they come up. This season so far started off with a bang. Tons of zombies. Greg Nicotero and his team have brought us tons of undead in the first episode, and believe me, it doesn't stop in the second. So far, we've seen a lot of changes in the group. It's a much darker story now, much more heavily involved. Rick is a much more colder, calculating character than he was in previous seasons. And so far, I mean, in my opinion, this season started out phenomenal. The roller coaster ride is not stopping. It looks like it's only getting better.
Stacey, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, just benchmarking off what Dave said. I don't know if you guys read the comic at all, but I think it's a really fun place to be as a fan of the comic and as a fan of the show. I'll just give you a little background. I read the first 48 issues of The Walking Dead, in a weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was something that I didn't read from the beginning. Sort of heard like, oh, it's really good. You got to read it, and then bought the trades, had them on the shelf forever, and one day just pulled them down and was like, okay, I'm going to read these, and read what I could describe as probably the most gut-wrenching comic experience I've ever read. Those first 48 issues. So if you've never done that, go do it, because it's so good. But right now, on the show, we've taken a little bit of a tangent from what's been in the comics. I think, especially with where we are in this season. But there's all those little nods to, hey, we're going to the prison. There's certain characters that are there. So I'm excited. I'm always excited for The Walking Dead because I'm a huge zombie fan, but I'm especially excited for this season because so much happens where they are right now in the comics. So I'm really interested to see if Kirkman decides to take it that same route, or if he decides to kind of go around and say, let's take the scenic route and maybe we'll get there eventually, or maybe take a completely different turn.
See, that's one thing. They had a panel, and Kirkman said it may or may not. Like Stacey said, he would not reveal whether the story will follow the comic book exactly. He said things that happen there may or may never happen. So it's great for fans of the book and the show because it's almost like reading the same story with the same characters, but you get two different alternate versions of it, and they're both highly enjoyable. So, I mean, it's an ultimate fan experience to have two congruent stories going at the same time of the same characters, but in almost a lot of similarities, but two divergent stories at the same time.
I just have to say this about the season premiere. I mean, Carl went from just being this annoying little brat in the first two seasons to, my God, what a badass he was.
Yeah, badass with a gun. Yeah.
She's walking in there with the gun with the silencer. I'm like, oh my God, is this the same annoying kid everybody wanted to die off?
Yeah, I'm a Carl fan, but I'm a Carl fan because of the comics, and so it's really a great thing for me to see Carl on the show kind of becoming what Carl is in the comics now. So I can see where people found him annoying, but I'm glad he's still around.
Well, what got me was the last step, when they were walking in, and all of a sudden the zombies come out in full riot gear. I'm going, man, this has a Resident Evil type video game feel to it. I mean, just to me, that impressed me. I didn't think of that going, hey, well, what if they got infected in riot gear? Well, now we know, and it's like kind of cool to see that transition. I mean, all in all, so far from what I've witnessed, I'm actually very excited from what I'm seeing.
Now, any of you guys, because we're talking just as the Walking Dead, the episode 2 of season 3 is premiering. Have any of you guys actually watched it at all yet?
Which episode?
The second episode premiering tonight.
Not yet.
No, not yet. No, it's actually recording right now.
I'm watching bits and pieces of it.
I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but there's a scene with Rick and a machete that will just define how the season's going to go.
That was awesome.
And it'll just blow your mind.
That was just on, literally 2 minutes ago. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Don't road. It is phenomenal. It gives you the idea of exactly where Rick's mindset is with dealing with things. And this show is just getting better. Like, you see some shows hit season 2 and season 3, they start winding down and not doing as well. The way they started season 3 off is just going to increase their fan base. I see this thing getting much bigger than it's already been, surprisingly, with season 3. And the great writing and great pace is kept up. So,
yeah, I'm enjoying how how the producers have written Rick in the way he is now. I mean, without Shane as the antagonist, Rick is almost like his own worst enemy right now, and you could see him kind of teetering back and forth with what he knows and what he's seen, and he's definitely not the man he was when the season 1 started.
Well, there was a teaser, and I put this in my review. There was a teaser they put out in a commercial where you see Lori telling Rick, do whatever you have to keep this group safe. And it's kind of giving Rick free rein to do whatever he feels necessary. And again, you'll see that in this episode. It starts to come, that freedom to do whatever he needs to do without remorse or regret starts to come out.
Well, you know, and looking at the whole thing with Michonne too. So Michonne, I mean, I kind of like the way she was introduced. I mean, I know the fans wanted her from the get-go, but I kind of like the way they massaged her in. And it's kind of had your mouth watering, wanting more. And I guess as the season progresses, we should see more. But, I mean, the way she was introduced was amazing.
Oh, I agree. It's very good. You know, I'm happy to see her. They're working her in slowly. And she's still a bit of a mystery, which I like, too. Right now, what I'm waiting for, we know he's coming. We don't know how he's introduced yet. We don't know where his place is currently. But I'm waiting for Merle to come back.
Yeah, I saw the teaser. I saw his little get-up he has, too. It kind of looks kind of cool.
Oh, he's got that kind of metal thing, like a stump on his hand.
Yeah, it's almost like a Captain Hook type machete type chain. It's almost like remnants to Evil Dead almost.
Exactly, you know, and Michael Rooker was at the panel at New York Comic Con, and he was a trip. He's basically talking his character up. Basically, I'm the total badass, and it's exciting to see this. It really has me on the edge of my seat as a big fan. I don't know you guys.
Yeah, I think they're doing such a good job too, building that fan base. And you know, as we record this, I just found out today because they just settled. I had Dish Network and did not have AMC, but they settled their suit and we got it back today. So I'm actually able to watch it now. So I'm super excited about that.
Yay!
Yay!
So, you know, but they do such a good job of handling the stories. They do a good job of doing the rundowns every week with Chris Hardwick and the Talking Dead. And you know, what I find interesting about the kind of the Walking Dead universe as a whole is I don't think that they overmarket it. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it's not like, hey, here's a Walking Dead Angry Birds game or, you know, something like that. It's like there's a video game out there and you can play it, I think, on your phone or your PC or your game console. And I got to say, as a child of the 80s and a fan of Choose Your Own Adventure books, that's what this Walking Dead game is like. It's like playing a Choose Your Own Adventure book, and it's amazing how tight that story is. You know, we're 4 chapters in now, and decisions that you made in Chapter 1 are still impacting your life in Chapter 4. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but the end of Chapter 4 is the most gut-wrenching end of a video game ever. And I actually probably shed a couple of tears when I got to the end because I can't wait to see what Chapter 5 is going to be like. I feel like it's going to be complete madness, but I think it's going to be a good kind of madness, I guess.
I finished Chapter 4 this week, so I'm with you. And I for our fans who are out there and who actually play this game on currently on, I think, Xbox Live, you can download it on your Xbox for it. Chapter 5 is going to be the last chapter of the game.
Yeah.
One of the guys, or might just. That's cool. I mean, the amount of comic book and reference they can do, I guess the possibilities are endless. But you know, like talking to Mark, you're in the realm of what the network wants, or at the end of the day, what the owners want. Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to watching tonight's episode. And actually, when we wrap this up, it definitely will be watched.
Yeah, I'm excited to, like I said, I think I'm more excited for this season just sort of knowing what I think is coming with the governor and all that stuff. You know, they've teased that the governor is out there. So if they do anything even close to what's in the comic, the fans of the show are in for a crazy ride.
Yeah, I'm watching it with my wife, and I just look at Lori, and I'm like, oh boy, I hope they don't end it the same way they do in the comic, because it ain't going to be pretty on the screen. It really isn't. Yeah, I really, I don't know. I don't know how people are going to get it, how they're going to get away with something like that.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that they're not big fans of Lori anyway, though. So I don't know.
Yeah, but you're going to have the people who love to protest for no reason, but a reason than the protest that are going to come out for it.
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
Pull from that stuff.
I mean, the way that went down was in the comics was just so horrid.
Brutal.
It's total brutal. It's just like, is the show actually going to go there? Are they going to go there? Is the big question.
You know, I don't think they will, and if they do, not in the way that they did it in the comic. Because I think if you hear anything that if you hear Kirkman talk about the show, you know, even with the stuff with Shane last season, you know, he said, I'm kind of glad Shane's still around because I got to do some things that I didn't get to do. I sort of get a do-over with some of those characters. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they're planning or anything, but my thought is that so much of the framework of this Walking Dead universe centers around Rick's family and centers around kind of those pieces that make Rick who he is. So even if they go the same direction, being a cable TV show, I don't think they can do it the same way. There are certain things that are in the comics that I wish they could do that happen kind of after all of that goes down, but I don't know, like that. And for anybody who's read it, specifically the telephone stuff, if you know what I'm talking about, I think it would be awesome to see on screen. But I don't think it would be accessible to everybody watching the show.
I don't know. They seem to get away with a lot as it is right now because they're not on a standard network, and it's the amount of gore that they are able to get away with and the language. Who knows where they're going to go with this? You know, it's just a matter of how far they're going to push the envelope.
Well,
Yeah,
I hope the show lasts for a while. I mean, you got to figure. You got characters like Daryl who were never in the comic book, and he's risen to a huge following out there, and he's a character that's original to the show and not the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy, I can't remember the actor's name of his character from the first season. Him and his son found Rick after he got out of the hospital.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name, though.
I would love to see those characters back.
Yeah.
I'd love to see them meet up and look again.
I think they come back in the books, if I'm not mistaken.
They do. There's a pretty heavy storyline where they sort of meet up with Rick and Carl again, and it's pretty intense.
Well, the actor's name was telling me that played the father. I loved him when he was in another post-apocalyptic show with Skeet Ulrich.
Oh, wow. No. Not
Jericho.
Oh, yeah.
Jericho. I love Jericho. It was a great show. I thought it was a phenomenal show that unfortunately ended. But his character in that show was great, and I love to see him in another similar type role that he was when he came into The Walking Dead. And I'm itching for him to be back on the show because he's just this great actor. And I just love the charisma he brings to the screen.
Yeah, it's like we said, the possibilities are endless. and being on not normal network, they have a little more reign, and it is noticeable. And you know, any other show. I mean, if you watch Hell on Wheels or Breaking Bad, I mean, the stuff they get on those shows too, it's almost like a free HBO in a way, almost.
That's very true.
Well, I mean, anybody have anything else to add about Walking Dead?
Oh, their names were Morgan and Dwayne.
There you go.
Sorry, I had to figure it out.
Oh, actually, I do have one more thing to add. And this is a Stacey's comment about not being overproduced with, like, toys and things like that. There is a shooter game, TV shooter game, kind of like a duck hunt you can buy for Walking Dead where you have a gun and shoot the screen. So the products
cool.
are getting out there.
Cool. I've seen that, like the new laser tags the same way with a phone and stuff like that. All right, guys. Well, we had a really good show today. We talked to Mr. Marc Guggenheim and learned some really cool things about him and his world and what he's done and what he's going to be doing. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of excited about him talking about that Justice League movie a little bit. And hopefully we see some good things from that. And Walking Dead, it's the new episode's airing tonight. Check it out, and probably have a little recap of that in a later day. Read Mr. Harriman's recap, if you like, on pendragons.com. What about some shout-outs? Mr. Dave, who's your shout-out for this week?
I'm going to give a shout-out to two places. One, Pendragon's Post. Just check for all your comic reviews, movies, and toys. Plenty of reviews out there. If you have any questions about anything you're looking to buy, check there first. Second B is check out our website, 4 Guys, 1 Girl, 1 and a Show. Check us out. If you have any comments or questions, things you'd like to hear us talk about, these comments so we know what you guys like to hear.
All right, Stacey, what your shout-out?
I just want to remind everybody we do have a Twitter account. It is at 4 Guys, 1 Girl, 1 Show, and all of the numbers are numerals. So check us out on Twitter. Same thing. You can tweet at us show topics or comments about the show.
Mike, how about you?
I want to give a shout out to Mark and Imperial Toys for listing us on his websites as much as possible. I also want to give a shout out to 3 Alarm Comics. If you need comics, these are your guys to go to.
Damn, Skippy. And I'm going to give a shout out to Mr. Isaac Rodriguez over there at DC Universe Unlimited on Facebook. Those guys really enjoy the podcast, a lot of buzz when we talk about it, and they allow us to post there as well, so definitely a big thank you there. Well, guys, and Miss Stacey, thank you all very much for joining us again, and hopefully we will see you next week.
Will do.